Hey everybody, another GMG review. Today we're taking a look at Gale Force Nine's new Gothic Sector Battlefield in a Box terrain. Now, the last time I reviewed some stuff from Gale Force 9, it was the Hex Tech terrain system, which was compatible with Battletech. This time around, they're taking on a 6mm Gothic or 10mm Gothic engagements, which of course would mean things like Legions Imperialis and of course Adeptus Titanicus, two of my favorite games currently from the Specialist Game Studio at Games Workshop. And therefore, I have some companion miniatures here for us to check this stuff out with. Now, this is the latest in Gale Force 9's pre-painted terrain sets. I've been using this stuff way back into the mid-2000s when they started with their tree stands. When Games Workshop got rid of their sort of like, I used to call them toilet brush trees, but they were trees that were an armature, a metal wire armature with plastic wire spoking, and then they were sort of like covered in like a green flock. Gale Force 9 started producing them in boxes, and I bought them like crazy. In fact, a lot of the trees that you see in like my fantasy and modern and post-apocalyptic battle reports are actually the Gale Force 9 original Battlefield in a Box terrain sets. Now, the Gothic Sector is done in a similar resin to... I actually don't know if it's the same as the resin that the Hextech stuff is in, but it's a similar resin to their previous Battlefield in a Box terrain stuff, which I used for things like Frostgrave. It was more fantasy oriented, some of the ruins, and it's slightly brittle. I would call this pet store resin. If you guys have ever bought pet store terrain or aquarium terrain features, it's a very similar grade of resin from like a texture point of view. And it is slightly brittle. It's almost chalky kind of the way that it feels, but nice and durable. And I haven't had really, except for like the really fine kind of edges, I haven't had really any issues with like rubbing or wear on the terrain sets I've had previous from them. So there are 5 box sets available in this run, this initial run, this like wave, and they are done with 4 factory colors. So a gray base coat, a red highlight on the windows, a silver highlight on the machine bits and doors, and then a brown highlight on additional things like the edges of some of the larger doorways, the sensorium nodule, I think, as well, for one of the other factory terrain features. And it gives some nice variation. It's more than enough over a black base coat. And I will say that the factory paint jobs in my hand look pretty much identical to the ones in the box. So they photographed a factory paint job. They didn't zhuzh one up for the box set, which I appreciate, having opened these up. Packaging wise, they're just wrapped in bubble wrap inside these box sets. And apart from one teeny tiny bit of damage on one of the biggest of the terrain features, everything came out of here without any damage whatsoever. And there are some fairly easy to snap off bits in sort of like the edges of these stairwells and stuff like that. So the packaging was fine for transit and stuff. So we'll start with this administratum building. They call it an administratum building, so they're not really trying to hide what the Mundus Imperialis terrain sets are being made for, the legally distinct Mundus Imperialis. And of course, for scale, the first thing I wanted to do was see where the infantry stands would be able to sit. They've made them 30 mil across. So all of your infantry stands, you can fit, I think it's 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on this particular building. It does mean that like visually, when you have them on the game table, you can actually put your miniatures on the buildings and have them occupy them, which I appreciate. They've sized it appropriately, basically. And all of the terrain features, when there is like kind of a visible spot for them to put a model, they've measured it to make sure that they can go on. They've even done a nice thing, which I'll show you in a minute, in one of the other buildings, where they've made some pieces removable to make sure they fit. The size is good. If you look at the infantry stands next to the doorways, which was kind of my litmus test here, the Space Marines look about like head high to the doorway itself, which means a regular human would come through about a foot underneath, or maybe a foot and a half underneath. So the scale is appropriate to the miniatures themselves. And it provides lots of nice blocking terrain. So I would call this like a Civitas Imperialis, which is the basic building size in Legions Imperialis and also Titanicus, which is the 2-wound basic building. As they get bigger, the 2 larger ones, I would call them, I think it's a Civitas Magnificat or whatever. It's the double-sized one. And they're appropriate for those rule sets. And this guy's plenty big enough to hide, at least height-wise, Warhound Titan. You'd get like partial cover definitely at least for a Warlord or a Reaver from this piece, but it's a good size for a single building box. Next up, we're going to have a look at one of the double box sets. There's 2 double box sets. The first one is the Scolum and Generatorum box set. Scolum, of course, being where all those nice orphans come from that join the Imperial Guard as commissars and/or stormtroopers. And these are a bit smaller, but together they're about the same footprint size as this larger building here. And just allow you to kind of divide up your terrain. So again, if you wanted to put a single stand of infantry on the Scolum, you can. I assume this is the Scolum. And it's tall enough that it'll obviously block line of sight to a building or to a vehicle, sorry, or provide partial cover to something like a Warhound Titan or a Reaver Titan. And the painting is of the same quality as the original in the Administratum building. This one will hold roughly 6 stands of infantry as well, because you can put 4 on this level, actually 7, I guess, 5 up here, and then 2 more on this side. So a good size, still hollow, still made from that same exact resin. And yeah, the painting quality is relatively high, so if you wanted to fill up your terrain a little bit faster, the double box is nice. This of the double boxes, I think, though, is the best value, because I think the footprint's the biggest on this one, and that's the Librarium and Sensorium. And this one has the most variation too. So the Sensorium has like this cool kind of like, I guess like a radar dome. I don't know, it's a Sensorium. It looks like a radar dome to me, but the infantry will fit 1 per on the sides here, but they've actually angled it so that it'll fit even around the Sensorium, which I thought was a neat trick. So you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 overall, which is basically a 4-man detachment with like a character attached to it. And this one's big enough you can actually go 2 side by side. So this will hold a full 6 stands on top of it. And the height's consistent, so like between the 2 of them, they have the same sort of like overall profile, which is nice if you wanted to make like rubble and stuff to go around them. And so yeah, between these 3 box sets, you're gonna get 5 pieces of terrain, which is a decent amount to fill up your table with. So now let's talk about some larger ones. Those are the 2 packs, the Librarium and Sensorium. And that's gonna get us on to this. I'm excited about this one. It's not my favorite, but it's very cool. This is the Civil Defense Bastion. This was, however, the only one of these that was damaged in the box. It had a small break in one of these parapets. So there was this little guy up here, which broke off. Although I think it's actually painted. It might actually not be a break, it might just be a casting bubble. Yeah, I think it's actually a casting bubble. This actually was a break though, because I had to glue this piece back on. So there was a piece here that broke off, I glued back in, and then this piece snapped out. And it looks like it was from dropping. This is a heavy piece of resin, even though it is still hollow. And it's enormous. You can definitely hide like a Reaver Titan or a Warlord Titan behind this. The Warhound just disappears behind it. But what's cool is they did, again, size it all so that your infantry can sit on each of these points. They won't sit in between them, however. So you can get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stands, and then a 7th in the middle if you want to have this thing all loaded up with infantry to show that it's being occupied. It does have a slightly different design look to it. It's still relatively like Gothic Cathedral, but it looks more Bloodborne than 40K to me. I don't know, there's something Dark Souls-y about this. Maybe even... what's the word? Souls-like is the best thing I can come up with in like a modern sort of like art style. It's an enormous, like, it looks more like a cathedral than like a military building, I guess what I'm saying, with these weird sort of like not crosses firing slits. What I want to know is what's firing from these firing slits. It must be enormous field guns or something to be able to track back and forth inside those things. And then the rest of it, like, is this an armored stained glass window? I don't really know. It looks really cool. It's just, it's not as militaristic as the other ones are. But definitely a very cool large piece. And then last but not least, my favorite piece of the whole set is this large piece right here, which is the Manufactorum Depot. It's basically a Titan hangar. So it's a giant, like walk out of it Titan hangar. It's a little bit small for the Warhound. I guess with his arms off, maybe he could walk out of it like hunched down. It's definitely knight-sized or tank-sized. So like your tanks can easily drive out of this thing. And it just looks really cool. It also has like a rooftop loading bay. And as I mentioned earlier, for shipping and for safety reasons, I'm assuming so they don't get broken, these flying buttresses actually are removable. They come detached, and that way you can fit your infantry into that little slot and then take it off and put it on. You have to try and fit them in afterwards. And that means you can fit 1, 2, 3, 4 per side underneath each of these things with no problem. And I appreciate that these were individually wrapped. They were safely wrapped in bubble wrap so that these kind of like more fiddly bits wouldn't break, and they fit in just fine. And the details are nice and sharp, I would imagine, because they're not, you know, like attached somehow. So this was the only one that I had to do any assembly on. It's not really assembly, it's just these being detached. And these are enormous terrain pieces. So you can see, definitely obscures a Warhound Titan or tanks. Will probably be like about like the head like and the gun arms peeking over for a Reaver Titan. And it'll give lots of cover for a Warlord Titan. It's a big, huge, I would call this like the military-sized building for Titanicus and Legions Imperialis. It's a big honking piece of terrain, and it's nicely painted. So even with just the 4 colors, they get a lot of time out of this. So overall, what are my impressions of this line? It's a good initial offering, right? Because you're gonna get, I think it's 7 pieces of terrain overall, 2 large, 3 medium, and 2 small. And you can fill up a table pretty quick. Like, this is quite a bit of terrain right out of the box pre-painted. I've always liked, I spend more time painting my miniatures than my terrain typically. Like, if I need a terrain piece for like a campaign or something like that, I like building terrain. But if you're starting a game from scratch and you want to quickly fill up a table, this is probably one of the best, quickest ways to do it. Value for money, I don't know, I didn't see the price tags on these yet, like at the time of recording, so I'm not super sure what they are. But I think this is going to be the kind of thing where if it comes pre-painted out of the box and it looks this good and it's ready to play, and you're the type of player where you value getting stuff on the table and not having to do all the work yourself, this is probably the kind of product for you. It definitely has its niche, and they're super easy if you want to zhuzh them up with some washes or just want to use it as a base coat and paint it yourself. Because it's just gray and white, like you could even just paint directly over top of this with airbrushing and then pick out your details and be done. There's tons of potential for these for even painters that want to use this as a primer coat basically and then use washes and detailing of their own afterwards. So I think it's good value for money if you think that your time is best spent on your personal miniature collection and the table isn't quite as important to you, or if you're starting from scratch and just want to get a selection of terrain done. This is probably going to be more economical for large buildings than buying the Civitas buildings from Games Workshop's going to be, no matter what these are priced at, just from like a raw volume point of view. And then what you could do even is you get the ruin sections from Workshop, like the ruin kit from Workshop is actually pretty expansive. You get a lot of ruins. And when these get destroyed, make some similar sized, you know, like bases for the destroyed template, which is what I'm probably going to do. I'll use my ruin kits that I have left over from the ruins I've already done for Legions to make some templates, basically some like footprints for these for when they get blown up. Because that's the big thing in Legions, the terrain's all destroyable interactive. And making large buildings with the Civitas kit, one, it takes forever, and two, you need a bunch of them to do it, to make something similar to this. And they look kind of samey in the end because they're all these one individual panels that you're kind of replicating over and over again. I like the uniqueness of these designs. So I'm going to probably make the ruins out of the GW kits, use these as my primary kits, and then when they get blown up, I'll just have a bit of both. And if I don't have them blown up, I can use the ruins as just additional terrain features. So there it is. I'm pretty excited about these. I do think that I haven't been let down really by the quality of the pre-painted stuff from Battlefield in the Box so far. There's only one time I didn't like a product of theirs, and it was I had to make it myself. It was their fall tree kit where the trees came out of the box. I had to glue the leaves to the kit. And I was like, wait, this defeats the purpose of Battlefield in the Box being already out of the box if I have to glue all this on already. I don't get what's happening here. This is exactly what it says in the tin. This comes out of the box ready to go. I unwrapped it out of the bubble wrap and it was ready to play. So I would give this a strong recommend for Legions players looking to quickly fill up their terrain. And honestly, I think no matter what this is priced, it's probably going to be cheaper for making the same size buildings from the Workshop kits that you have to assemble yourself. So there it is. Big thanks for Gale Force 9 for sending these along. You'll see them featured in a couple battle reports coming up in the next 2 weeks. I've played 2 games on them so far with my Legio Astorum, my Titanicus Legion against some Sons of Horus that you'll see some battle reports where these are keyly featured. And yeah, and until those show up there, I hope you enjoyed this review. Big thanks for watching. Till then, I'm Ash. Board Gaming.